but I like it. Question. Guys, men, guys. Have you ever asked a woman when she's due and she wasn't? I think the average guy does this, on average, just one time. And I will tell you, as your pastor, unfortunately, I am above average. I think we have all been, right, in a conversation and had words come out, and we're like, oh my gosh. And we should have, before we said them, right, we should have hit this button right here. And we didn't. And then once the words are out there, they're just out there. And so while we wish we had this button available, it is actually, if you can make that work, please talk to me. That would be helpful. But life just doesn't work that way. You can't just go back and unsay what you've said. So we're in this series called Words, and we started with a very simple idea last week, and it goes like this: quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And we had some hand motions for that. Does anybody remember what those are? Okay, do it with me if you remember. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Okay? And so the reason we did the whole hand motion thing with that is because when we get into a difficult conversation, like we're having an argument or it gets really intense, we tend to, if you watch people, we tend to kind of close up physically. And as our bodies and our hands sort of clench up, we tend to close our hearts and we tend to close our minds and we tend to close our ears. And the reason that happens for us is that we want what the person that won't stop talking wants. Okay, you want the same thing that the person you're arguing with wants. You want to be heard and you want to be what? Understood. You want to be heard and you want to be understood. Okay, so picking this up where we left off last week, as you know, words are powerful. Words are extremely powerful. In fact, your life has primarily been shaped by words. And my life has primarily been shaped by words. All of our lives have been shaped by the words that are spoken to us, spoken over us, or spoken about us. I mean, words shaped our childhood experiences. Words are shaping your marriage. They're shaping your deepest relationships. Words impact your self-confidence. They impact who you see when you look in the mirror. Like people with very little confidence have gained confidence simply through words spoken to them or over them or about them. And people with a ton of confidence have lost that confidence the same way. And the thing that makes this so challenging is that the words we receive and the words we speak aren't equally weighted. Right? So how many positive words does it take to counter negative words? It takes a lot. Okay, it depends on the situation, but it takes a lot more. I mean, if you go into work and you get a performance review, and your boss says like 30 positive things about you, and then there's just 3 criticisms, 3 growth areas, 3 things you might improve on. Okay, when you think about that review a few weeks later or a few months later, what is it that you remember from that review? It's the negative, right? It's the criticisms. It takes many, many positive words to counter a single negative. And here's something else. Not only are the words not weighted the same, but also the source is not equally weighted, is it? I mean, certain people, they carry more weight than other people. Some people's words carry a lot of weight, don't they? I mean, the most important people in our life usually are the ones that carry the most weight. Your best friend's words carry a whole lot more weight than the person flying by you on I-5, right? I hope. I mean, if those are impacting you the same, we can get you into counseling. But the words of your boss, they're going to carry a lot more weight for you than the receptionist that you barely talk to or some other person that you barely talk to. If you're a mom, your words carry so much weight to your kids. And if you're a dad, and I don't know why this is, but often it's your words that carry the most weight of all. I see a lot of people nodding, just like that's your experience. And for many of you, you've felt this many times in your life. The words of your dad can lift you or they can destroy you. And I see this a ton in Jen. It's interesting being married to her because her dad's words are so weighty for her. Like her mom can criticize her and she's like, okay, whatever, right? And she doesn't like it, but she's like, whatever, mom. But if her dad has a negative word, she is like wrecked by it. And the words of a dad are so essential to a son. And then in a very different but very powerful way, the words of a dad are also crucial to a daughter. And I don't know why this is the case. I don't know why this happens, but I see this time and time and time again. And then one more thing that's true. Recovery time isn't equally weighted. When someone says something hurtful to you, like it hurts immediately, but recovery from it takes time. In fact, in many cases, no amount of words to the contrary can create immediate healing. Like you've been wounded and they can say, yeah, but it just doesn't go away right away. And this is why it's so ridiculous when we feel like we can fix things by saying, well, but I said I'm sorry, right? If saying sorry, like, as if that should suddenly take away all the hurt. The implication is, when we do that, it's like, I said I'm sorry, and so why aren't we fine now? We should be fine now. Why aren't we back to the way we were before I said what I said? But it just doesn't work that way, does it? I mean, okay, if I slam your hand in the car door, and then I open the car door and you pull your hand out and it's crushed and everything, and I say, I'm so sorry, that was an accident. Okay, that's nice. If I say sorry, I mean, that's nice. But you still got a mangled hand, right? You're not back to whole. You still need to take a trip to the ER. And the same is true with our words. When words hurt, more words don't usually take away the hurt right away. So, and this is James' whole point. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Now, last week we started with the words of James, the brother of Jesus, which is, just in thinking about the reality of that, is awesome to me. The little brother of Jesus writing a letter. And you just think of what growing up with Jesus as your older brother would have entailed. But James went on to be the leader of the Christian movement in Jerusalem. And then, as we saw last week, he was killed in AD 62, okay, about 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. James was stoned for his teachings about Jesus and about the resurrection. But before that, he wrote a letter to Christians about the way of Jesus. And he has a lot to say in that letter about the power of words. In fact, my guess is that for many of you, your greatest relational regret, and we all have tons and tons of regrets. We've all said things that we wish we could take back. But my guess is that our greatest relational regrets could have been avoided if we would have listened to the words of James. Now, we can't hit the rewind button, but we can hit the pause button. And if we listen to the words of James and we own them, you and I actually might be able to avoid all kinds of future relational regrets. So James begins this discussion with some words that are definitely true. If you're sitting here, you're going, I'm not sure if I believe in the Bible. I'm not sure if the Bible's true. These words are definitely true. Okay, he says, we all stumble in many ways. Now, if this was a Baptist church, I would have gotten an amen right there. Right? Amen. Yes, bring it. It's good. It's good. Because that is absolutely true, isn't it? And he goes on and he says, anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect and able to keep their whole body in check. In other words, okay, if you gain control of your mouth and gain control of your words, you gain control of your tongue, you will be able to keep your entire body out of trouble. In other words, as your mouth goes, so goes your life. And then James, in this very, very practical teaching. And that's what James does. It's very practical stuff. And by the way, if you're someone who doesn't really read the Bible, and you're in a spot where you're like, well, I think I'd like to read something, right? But I wouldn't even know where to start. Here's an idea. Start with the book of James. It isn't really a book. It's just a letter. It's just a couple of pages. So you can read this thing in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But it's filled with all kinds of practical insight for life. So James gets practical here, and he gives us an example of what he's talking about. His first example is this. He says, here's what I'm saying. It's like this. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Okay, if you can get control of the mouth of the horse, he's saying, you can control the entire horse. Do we have any horse people in here? We've got somebody. Heidi, come on. You're a horse people. Not as many horse people here as I would hope. I grew up with horses, and I lived in Linwood. How about that? We had a few acres, and then our next door neighbors also had a few acres, and they had stables, and they boarded horses for people. So in between our two properties, we had a fence, an electric fence. And I'll just say, as a kid, I was curious. And I had heard through the grapevine that if a little boy went number one and hit the fence, it would feel kind of funny. And so I just want to assure all of you, it does not feel kind of funny at all. But this was Linwood, okay, in the 80s, early 80s. And there were horses in stables. And I was just like, man, Linwood has changed. Those two pieces of property, ours and our neighbors, now there's like 25 houses on that spot. So no more horses, just like house on house on house. But here's what was always crazy to me, because they would board horses, and then the people that owned them would eventually come over and ride them. Have you ever seen like a really little kid riding a horse? Is that not the craziest thing? I found an image just online. Actually, that was me. No, found this online, but is that like, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you go, how can a little human being that small guide a massive horse like that? How? How does that work? Why does that work? Well, according to James, you control the mouth of the horse, and you control the entire animal. And then he's like, okay, shift into another example in case that didn't make sense to you. He says, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Right? These massive ships steered by this tiny little rudder. So here's a drawing of an ancient ship, and you can see the little rudder here, right? Which is kind of nuts when you think about it. This giant boat with several sails, and it could hold tons of cargo, and in spite of strong winds or the currents that it was facing, this little itty-bitty rudder determines the direction of the entire ship. And his point here is obvious. Small part, big influence, right? Small part, big influence. So a rudder on a ship or the bit in the mouth of a horse may be proportionally insignificant, but it has extraordinary influence in terms of the direction of the ship or the direction of the horse. James goes on. He says, likewise, the tongue is only a small part of the body. Now, you take a second to think about how true this is. It's this tiny little thing with incredible influence. It has the power to control your destiny. Like a tongue, which is generally about 4 inches long, okay, unless you're the lead singer from Kiss. And it turns out it's made up of about 8 muscles. And this is interesting, and this I don't think you'll find this too surprising, but the 8 muscles in your tongue, they never get tired. They never wear out, right? They never get exhausted. And you've known someone and you're like, that's true. So this little tiny part of us can determine the direction of our lives, and that can be for good or it can be for not so good. So James continues. He says, consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark, okay? And so you get the image. We've seen a whole lot of this, right, this last summer. Just nuts what was going on all around us. Just thousands of acres being consumed by flames. And some of you had real personal interactions with this. And so you just imagine millions of dollars of damage in real estate and homes. And James says, all it takes to set that off is a single spark. Okay, and his point is something so small leads to something so vast. Okay? So just the tiniest little spark can do unbelievable damage. Unbelievable damage. James, do we have that next slide? Just the tiniest spark can lead to like scorched earth. It can do unreal damage. And then James dives into, like, more deeply into this illustration. And this is where he just starts sounding like a Baptist preacher, but he says, the tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. So our tongue, okay, our mouth, has the potential, and I think we would agree with this, for endless evil. Now, as we're going to see next week, as we dive into the positive side of this, it also has the potential for endless good. It can do endless good. But right now, James is focused on the damage it can do. And he connects it to hell. Why? Because the potential for damage is endless. And you think of the damage or the evil that gets initiated by words, right? Divorce. And what leads to divorce is often initiated by words. Murder can be initiated because of an argument. Wars have been started, many wars have been started over words. And James says we're all born with our pilot lights lit. And so James says the tongue can corrupt the whole body, set an entire life on fire. As your words go, so goes your life. As your words go, so goes your relationships. You have the potential to burn down a relationship with words. I can burn down my marriage with words. I can burn down a friendship with words. I can burn down my relationship with my kids, right? With words. I can burn down my career. I could burn down my future with words. And the truth is, if we're honest, some of us have like scorched the people we love most with our words. Like our kids. You think about, like, why would we scorch our kids? But there it is. Negativity and sarcasm and criticism. Or the person that we said yes to spending the rest of our life with, and then we turn around and we scorch them with our words. And instead of having their back, they get friendly fire from home. Instead of building them up, we tear them down. Instead of defending them when we're out in public, we're the ones taking shots at them. And before you know it, the people that we love most are wounded and they're scorched. And they need some time, like in the burn unit. And when we're confronted with the truth of what we've done, what do we usually do? We defend ourselves with what? More words. Well, I was just being honest. Well, I was just mad. Yeah, I know I said it, but I was drunk. Well, I didn't mean it. But the truth is, and we know this, right? If you start a fire accidentally, this is the law. If you start a fire accidentally, you're still responsible for the fire you started. And so if you start a fire with your words, whether it's an accident or not, you're still responsible for the fire you started. which is why this whole point is so critical. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And he finishes by saying, you'll have to guard your tongue your entire life. This isn't going to go away. He says all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. What? His point is the human race has been able to pretty much subdue the entire world. It's pretty impressive. It's like the entire animal kingdom. So most of us don't go to sleep at night being like worried that we're going to be eaten before morning. Like bears, lions, crocodiles, they're vicious, but we have the upper hand. Okay, so he's saying the human race isn't really being threatened by the animal kingdom. Now, in the future, we may be threatened by apes. If you've seen Planet of the Apes, you know all about that. But for the most part, okay, up to this point, the human race has not been threatened by the animal kingdom. We have found a way to subdue the animals. Now, every once in a while something happens, right? A shark attack or a snake bite or whatever. But as a population, we've subdued the animal kingdom. The animals do not threaten the human race as a whole. James says, okay, we've done that. He says, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. He's like, guys, you can tame lions and bears and elephants and horses, but you can never fully domesticate the tongue. It's dangerous and it can strike at any time. It's restless. It's ready to take action and do damage. So, here's the point. Never, ever let your guard down. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. And James says, not only is it restless, but it's full of deadly poison. In other words, when it strikes, when the tongue strikes, it can kill stuff. And you think about how many arenas of life where that's true. Like right now, today, I'm up here with a microphone, right, on my cheek. And I know this is impossible to imagine, but I could ruin my entire career, or I don't like calling this a career, but my ministry with words, right? I could say some stuff, I could say some things right now, and then next week, you guys would come to church, and our entire church board would have to stand up here and say, y'all remember Jason? Right? Well, yeah, for those of you that were here, what happened last week, he's not going to be back. He said that he's so sorry, but still, he's not coming back. See, I could stand up here, and with a few words, I could kill my future in ministry. And not only would I not be welcome in this church, I wouldn't be welcome in any church, just because of words. That's the power of words. That's the poison. That's why I need to guard my words. It kills stuff. And then he illustrates just how unpredictable the mouth is, how it swings from one extreme to another. He says, with the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Well, that's weird. He's like, so we can go to church, right, and praise God and sing worship songs, and we can pray and talk to God and tell him that we love him, and we can mean it. We can be sincere. And then not an hour later, out of that same mouth comes words that are tearing people down. We're criticizing, we're mocking, we're sarcastic, we're gossiping. So we can say we love God in one breath and then turn around and treat the people that God loves with unbelievable disrespect. And before I get all like righteous on you, just so you know, I'm talking about me here. You do not want to hang out with me after church. I mean, honestly, I have felt myself do this so many times. Like, what am I doing? Why? Why does that happen? Because my tongue is unstable. It needs to be guarded, and it's filled with poison. And this is all of us. And if we don't believe it, we're in denial. And James is saying, have you ever thought about how bipolar your mouth is? I mean, how can beauty and goodness flow from it one moment and then evil the very next? He says, can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? And his first century audience would be like, no, James, no. The salt water would corrupt the fresh. And James is like, that's right. So he says, my brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Okay, examples of everyday life for them. He says, neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. And here's his point. There is nothing else in nature like our mouths. Something is uniquely, disturbingly wrong with our mouths. And then what comes next for James is a shock. Here's what he says next. The end. The end? That's it? No, he like finishes that whole subject and then just goes right on to the next topic. James, you can't do that, right? I guess James wasn't trained to make a praise sandwich like we are in our culture, right? This is how we do it in our culture, right? When you give people hard feedback, and if you've never been trained this is going to be a unique opportunity for you. When you give people hard feedback as a teacher or a coach, right, or a parent or a boss, you make a praise sandwich. You start with praise. You start with positive words. And then when they're unsuspecting, you slip in a little bit of criticism, and then you bring it back to some praise, and you sandwich it. It's a praise sandwich. Billy, you're trying so hard. Great job. Next time, though, you have the basketball, you can't just run with it. Okay, you have to dribble. But I love how fast you're running and how hard you're trying, Billy. Praise sandwich. This is American psychology, right? If you talk to Eugene, he's like, what is this? Right? We don't do this in Russia. No, you don't. This is an American thing. This is how we do it. But James doesn't do this. And it feels weird. James, like, what are you doing? Why don't you give us some hope? Why don't you give us something positive? And for heaven's sakes, why not give us at least some practical tips, right, on how to do this better? Why not give us some good application, like how to fix our mouths? But by ending abruptly without any of that, here's what I think he's doing. I think he's saying there is no, like, once and for all solution for this. This is going to be a constant battle, like for the rest of our lives. There is no, like, hey, once you learn this, you've got it. There is no, hey, like, once you're mature enough, you're done. Once you hit a certain age, you'll get it and you'll be done. Now, this is a constant battle that we will fight for our entire lives. Our mouth has this constant potential for great good, as we're going to look at next week. But our mouth also has constant potential for hurt and damage and evil. It determines the direction and the quality of your life. It determines the direction and the quality of your family, the direction and quality of your marriage, the direction and quality of your parenting, the direction and the quality of your friendships, okay, your career. And James says, look, this is like a really big deal, and you're never safe. Your mouth is restless and capable of striking at any moment, so don't be naive. You need to be on guard. And that might lead us to ask, like, why? Like, why is this such a struggle, right? Why is this such a struggle? And of course, there's lots of reasons. First of all, we're all broken. All of us are broken. None of us are completely whole. We all have all of this stuff in us that's boiling up at any given moment. There's jealousy, fear, anger, insecurity, all that kind of stuff. And when those emotions get stirred up and that stuff starts flowing and then our mouth starts going, watch out, right? Because we're broken. We are. And we don't like to hear this, but we're sinful. We have darkness in us, all of us. And when that darkness then connects to our mouth, watch out. But there's another reason I think that this is such a struggle. It isn't just that there's sin in this. It isn't just that there's brokenness in general in us. Here's something else. And this is true of every single one of us in this room. We've all been hurt by words ourselves. I mean, we are, all of us, the walking wounded. We're all carrying junk from our past, some pretty heavy stuff. One of the most difficult seasons in my life was my parents' divorce. Some of you have been through that. It's rough. From 2 years old, this is kind of my little history real quick. From 2 years old to fourth grade, I lived with my mom and my stepdad. Then at the end of fourth grade, right before summer break, my mom divorced my stepdad, walked away, and she and I moved from Linwood area to Mukilteo. And I didn't have any siblings. It was just me and my mom. And to tell you the truth, that was one of the hardest seasons of my life. The change in all of it was really hard. As you can imagine, I had to go to a new school, and I initially hadn't made really very many new friends, and there was this deep feeling of the loss of the old ones. And then there were tons of other changes that go with all of that. We moved from a huge house, right, that had a huge front yard and the acreage and the horses next door and all of that into this little tiny condo unit in Mukilteo. And there weren't any other kids in the condo complex. But I used to have all these friends in the neighborhood, and we had all this space where we could run and play. But this new place didn't even really have a neighborhood. And the hardest part of all of it was that my stepdad and I, prior to the divorce, had been really close. Really, really close. And he was very good to me. I was so fortunate. He was so good to me. And we connected in a lot of different ways, but the main thing for us, as you might imagine knowing me, was sports. We connected around sports. We would play catch, we would shoot baskets, we would watch all kinds of different games on TV. And he was kind of a quiet guy, didn't have a lot to say, but we could really connect around sports. And so for several years, he had coached my basketball team. Well, after the divorce, my mom was upset with him about some financial stuff that they had between them. And since he was my stepdad, he had married my mom when I was 2, he had no legal rights to me. So my mom told him that he just couldn't see me anymore. Like, until he gave her what she deserved, he couldn't see me. So I became leverage. And so I didn't see him for several months. After a while, my mom kind of caved and was like, this isn't working and this is stupid. And she changed her mind. But my relationship with him really was never quite the same. At least I could go and see him a little bit. And so, like I said, they split in the summer, and I didn't see him for most of the fall. And by winter, we started reconnecting a little bit. And by winter, I started playing basketball. But I didn't play for my old team with my old friends in Linwood, the one that won the city championship, right? The one that my dad coached. Instead, I played in Mukilteo. And like pretty much everything else in my life at that time, it was not going well. My new coach didn't like me, didn't treat me like I was very good. And that was like especially hard because sports were my whole identity. Like if I'm not good at this, I'm not good at anything. But even basketball wasn't going well. After a few games, my stepdad called, and he said that he would come watch. And I don't know if I can communicate to you how excited I was. Like the night before, if you had that experience where I just like couldn't even sleep, it was such a big deal. Okay, so he comes, and the game doesn't go well. Our team sucked. And we got smoked. And I was all out of whack. I was all out of sync. I just didn't play well. It was a struggle. And I was embarrassed about it. So after the game, I went straight to my stepdad, right? And I wanted him to tell me it was all okay, that I was still really good. I wanted him to get mad with me at everyone else. I wanted him to tell me how bad my coach was. I wanted him to notice how horrible the refs were. They didn't call anything. They didn't call the right stuff. I wanted him to tell me how bad my teammates were, right? I wanted him to say something like, man, Jason, this is a terrible situation. How can you play with kids that are that unskilled, right? Those losers can't pass, they can't catch, they can't shoot, they don't know where to space themselves out on the floor. It's horrible. I don't think anyone could play well with a group of idiots like that. And the refs, man, the refs were horrible. They don't know what they're doing. Your coach doesn't know basketball at all. What kind of an offense is he asking you guys to run? No one could be successful running that kind of an offense. That would never work. Okay, like this is a mess. But despite all of that stuff, it is obvious to anyone who knows the game of basketball that you can play, right? That you're a heck of a player. That you're just in a really tough situation. But I just want to tell you, it'll get better. Just keep playing because, Jason, you can play. And of course, that's not what he said. You know, I run over to him, I look up at him, and he's got this like disgusted look on his face. And he says, what the heck happened to you? He goes, I thought we had a pretty good little basketball player. And in light of all that was going on for me in my life at that time, I can't tell you what that did. So we get back to our little condo, and I'm just wrecked. I mean, I'm wrecked. And my mom is looking at me, and she can see it. I was a mess. Like, I just couldn't get over it. I just keep hearing the words echoing. I thought we had a pretty good little basketball player. Like, what's going on? And my mom could see it, and she could see all the hurt in my face. And after a while, she couldn't stand it. So my mom finally said, all right, get in the car. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, get in the car. We're driving over to the house. And I'm like, what? No. She's like, get in the car. And my mom's like, you obey. And so she drove me straight over to our old house, okay, with all the acreage and the horses next door, and straight to my stepdad. And she pounded on the door until he opened it. And then she just said, Jason, I need you to tell him how that made you feel. And I'm like, deer in the headlights, like, and it was horrible. So I'm trying to even speak, and I just lost it. And I look up into the face of my stepdad, and he's just crying. I mean, it was awful. The whole situation, the whole mess was awful. Just being separated and all of that. And looking back on it now in retrospect, I cannot imagine all the emotions he was feeling. But he apologized the best that he could, and smoothed it all over. And here's the crazy thing. I remember that event like it was yesterday. It was a painful season that was sort of capped off by words that day that just sort of tipped me over. Now, I bring this up because every single one of you has been wounded by words. Every single one of you has. We have all looked to the people who were supposed to love us, and instead of protecting us, they wounded us. And in fact, this story with my stepdad is almost embarrassing to tell. Like, this is a bad thing that I remember in my life. You're not a good basketball player. Get over it, dude. Right? This is such small potatoes compared to some of the stuff that you guys have lived through. I grew up with parents that loved me. They were in my corner. I knew it. Some of you come from homes, you come from environments that I can't imagine, and unthinkable words have been spoken to you, over you, about you. And the damage that you are carrying from that is unreal because you got scorched over and over and over and over. And it might have been home. It might have been school. Could be that you had a hard time fitting in and you were mistreated and you were damaged. and you were badly damaged. Why is taming the tongue so hard? Because all of us are carrying around some wounds, and some of you are carrying around stuff I can't even imagine. And here's what we know. Hurt people, right? Hurt people. And so what can happen is it just turns into this ongoing cycle. And that just leads me to one last thought. Okay? Somebody has to step up and break the cycle. Someone has to step up and break the cycle. And so for those of you that grew up in homes or environments where words were routinely used against you, where you were scorched over and over and over, I just want to plead with you, please, for the sake of the next generation, don't repeat that cycle. And let's get real. You will be inclined to repeat that cycle. In fact, some of you, you've heard words coming out of your own mouth and you think like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, you know where it came from. But you need to stop the cycle. Someone has to step up and break the cycle. And here's why this matters so much. Because words are powerful. And as I said earlier, and I don't know why this is the case, but dads, our words tend to carry the most weight. I don't know why. But when we say hurtful things, those words tend to be the heaviest for our kids. But it isn't just dads, right? It isn't just moms. I mean, kids. You think about kids, and that's all of us. Okay, we're all somebody's kids. And if you have a parent that you still talk with, guess what? Your words matter. Guys, our words are, as like kids to our parents, our words as kids to our parents carry so much weight. And especially when we're young. I think we start to see this when we get a little older, but when we're young, we just don't see it, right? As kids, we're like, oh, no, it's just my mom, right? That's just my dad. But see, there's no such thing as just my mom or just my dad. Regardless of your age, your words to your parents matter, and they matter way more than you realize. And then, you ladies that have a man, can I just say something on behalf of all men? We look like we're so tough, right? Especially me. We look like we are so tough, like we can take anything. Bring it, sister, right? And we laugh when we're criticized. But ladies, us guys, our egos are so fragile. So if you have a man, I just want to plead with you, ladies, guard your words. And men, come on. Honor women with your words. This is so huge. Honor women with your words. The women in your life. The women at work. Like any woman that you come into contact with, you just decide, I'm going to honor women in the presence of women. And I'm going to honor women when there aren't even any women around. And here's why this should be important to you. Because that's the world you want to live in. And men, that's the world you want your daughter and your granddaughter to grow up in. So guys, words matter. And James says, together, let's be people who guard our tongues.